even at 3-12, you can't say that the Browns aren't still interesting. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer Sherman, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. You can't say the Browns aren't still interesting. I know they're 3-12. I know it's week 17, but there's a lot of fun storylines coming up for this Browns matchup with the Steelers. There's a full circle storyline, by the way, that can be completed on Sunday with Myles Garrett getting the sack record. I'll explain. And depending on what happens Saturday, Browns Steelers could end up being a slog. I give you my prediction for the game. I do want to thank you for being every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network, and it's all thanks to you. And I want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be in the middle of the action, visit FanDuel.com and place NFL live bets all season long. So listen, I understand that the Browns are in the midst of another 3-win season as things stand right now. It has not gone the way anybody had hoped. I think maybe it has gone at least somewhat of the way some people have expected. But what's interesting about this matchup this week is that there still is a lot of storylines sort of intertwined into a Browns-Steelers matchup for late December, with one team trying to play for the playoffs or make the playoffs, and the other team obviously on the outside looking in. We already know that about the Browns. When it comes to all those things, though, I think all of this starts with the convergence of these two rival teams in this division, the AFC North, and all the history that comes with that. The years of the Steelers beating up the Browns, and I talked about this earlier in the week. Like, there's always something extra to this game, no matter when it's played, no matter what the records are, no matter who's wearing what uniforms, no matter what all those things look like. There's always extra juice that comes with this one. Browns fans want to see the Browns beat the Steelers, no matter what. No matter who's a quarterback, no matter what the stakes are, all of that matters. And I think it all kind of starts there. The idea of beating the Steelers, getting a 4th win on this season. And I talked about sort of the push and pull of, do you want to win against the Steelers, or do you want them to lose so that they can still have maybe the best draft space, the best placement in the draft? There's a convergence of those two sort of things here happening on the field on Sunday when they face off with the Pittsburgh Steelers, that fans kind of have to debate and toil with internally whether or not they, which side of that coin I guess that they fall on. But by and large, though, most Browns fans will always tell you that they want to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's the most important game to them, or most important games to them. And I do think there's actually going to be a pretty good crowd on hand for this one because it's the Steelers and it's the last home game of the season and all those different things. So that's where it all begins. But listen, there are branches off of this as well. And maybe first and foremost is Myles Garrett chasing the sack record, right? That's the thing that I think most people are still sort of tuning in for, to see if he can get this thing done, especially in 16 games at home in front of that crowd. There's an element to this that I'll talk about coming up next, where TJ Watt could be in attendance. He obviously is a shareholder of that record with Michael Strahan. Doing it with him in the building is kind of part of this as well. And there's another tentacle of that as well against the quarterback he could potentially get it against. And no, I'm not talking about Aaron Rodgers. Like, there is a lot that kind of all comes into that conversation as well. Then you have a Browns team that is also playing a rookie quarterback right now and trying to figure out if he's the guy for the future. He's got 2 games left to sort of convince them he's worthy of being part of their plans at the very least, and maybe at least being in the mix to compete for that job. We'll see what that looks like. But if he can't, then it becomes, okay, are they drafting a quarterback? What does that sort of plan look like for this team? And so, yeah, I like that's another part of this conversation, is the quarterback situation, the future of the quarterback situation. What are the options? Who's a legitimate option? Who are they actually going to consider for the role? Or are they going to be right in line to draft somebody next, in April when they're on the clock, wherever they are in the NFL draft, and try to find their guy that way? Like, all these, that's maybe the biggest storyline of all, is the draft placement, how they handle those picks, what the quarterback situation is going to look like. And then I already kind of alluded to it with that part of this conversation, but you also then have the idea that winning this football game is bad news in terms of trying to set yourself up in the best position possible to take a quarterback if that's the route that they're going to decide to go here. Because if you win another game, now you're talking about drafting later in the top 10, maybe 6th or 8th or whatever it might be, and now all of a sudden you're not necessarily guaranteed one of the top quarterbacks in this class. You're maybe not in position to do so. Now you could trade up depending on who gets that one spot, especially with having 2 first-round picks. But that comes into play here as well in terms of like what a win does for this team, and in some ways like maybe it negatively impacts where they land in the draft order. That's something else to consider. So there is a lot that's kind of going on and being that is converging. All these different sort of lanes and stories and all that intersect on Sunday, and I haven't even gotten to the coaching conversation. We know Jimmy Haslam said it's got to be more than 3 wins during training camp for this team to sort of retain everybody and feel good about the direction they're heading. A 4th win, maybe, is a 4th win enough? Is that enough of an improvement to be like, you know what, let's keep these guys intact? If it's not, then you're still talking about a team that's likely to make some changes here after a couple weeks from now in some capacity with their front office or coaching staff or whatever it might be. And those are big, heavy decisions that have to be made as well. And so these 2 final games and, starting on Sunday with the Steelers could potentially impact that. There is a lot that is kind of converging here for a team that only has 3 wins on the season. They are certainly not boring. And, that's why I do think, like, I get it. It's Christmas week, all these different things, but it does feel like I go into every single Sunday, and I think many fans do as well, feeling like there is a lot to sort of still talk about with this team. There's a lot to still figure out with this football team in terms of their direction, in terms of their future. It's the quarterback thing. It's the is anybody getting fired thing. It's the, draft position thing. It's, but that's all also opposite of there's still a football game being played, and it's against the Pittsburgh Steelers, the team that everybody still wants to see you beat every single year. And it's a rivalry game, and it's a division game, and you can potentially play spoiler to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It all depends what happens on Sunday, which we're going to talk about throughout the show because that's part of my prediction for today as well. But like that's a factor here too, because if the Ravens lose on Sunday, the Steelers come in, they have nothing to play for. They clinch the division. Like, how does that impact all this? Are you actually going to be playing spoiler to the Pittsburgh Steelers? But you could. If the Ravens somehow win that game on Saturday, all of a sudden the Browns get a chance to play spoiler, which is maybe one of the last things you get to play for when you're not a playoff team anymore, is knocking other teams out, taking other teams with you to Cancun. So it's a 3-12 team that certainly doesn't lack storylines. And so that's why, like, even this week 17 matchup with the Steelers, that feels like it's just, sort of wash, rinse, repeat of another week of Browns football, I'm actually super intrigued by, because there's still so many questions unanswered and so many things that have to be finalized in both on and off the field between Myles' sack record, potentially knocking the Steelers out of the playoffs or keeping them out of the playoffs. But then off the field, the big decisions that await this team with the front office, with the people in charge, but then the draft and whatnot, quarterback decisions. There's a lot at stake here. And so Sunday, I think, sort of brings all that together and converges it with the matchup that everyone looks forward to every year, a visit from the Pittsburgh Steelers here in Cleveland. We talked about Myles and the sack record. I think doing it in front of TJ Watt is part of this full circle storyline that can be completed, but there's another part of this too in terms of the quarterback he could get it against. And it once again goes back to what could happen on Saturday. I will talk about that and play you some audio as well coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the games, you're reacting in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel gets you in on that moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up throughout a game. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every game, every possibility. Browns Steelers on Sunday without DK Metcalf, with the potential that the Steelers could be playing for nothing. The line has shifted. It's Steelers -3. Can the Browns pull it off? You can go play that line right now. You can bet the over-under. You can bet anything you want between the Browns and the Steelers at FanDuel. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, just visit FanDuel.com. Place your NFL bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Today's show is also brought to you by Gametime. The NFL season is in full swing, and there's nothing better than being at the game. The crowd noise, the energy, the cheering alongside other fans and your friends or family watching at home is great, but being in the stadium is just different. The frustrating part has always been getting tickets, waiting in queues, dealing with logins, and watching prices change right at checkout. That's why the Gametime app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. One of my favorite features is being able to view my seat before I buy. So there's no surprises. You know exactly what the field is going to look like from that vantage point where you're going to be sitting. I also really like that the fees are all included up front. The price you see when you're trying to click on seats and tickets is the price that you pay at the end. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Your first purchase terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. You get $20 off. Download Gametime today and get back to being there live. So there's a very interesting wrinkle to the Myles Garrett sack chase that could potentially happen on Sunday. Well, and first and foremost, I guess there's two parts to this. The first part is, I think it's, and I'm going to play some audio here from Myles. Myles doesn't seem to think it's all that interesting, but I think, and I think fans think, it's a pretty, one of the best parts about this record going this long and him not breaking it last week against the Bills is the fact that it gets to happen potentially in front of the Pittsburgh Steelers and potentially in front of TJ Watt, who is obviously one of the shareholders of that record. He and Michael Strahan share it, 22.5 sacks. And TJ Watt has been limited this week, but it sounds like he could be playing this weekend. Again, depending on what happens on Saturday with the Ravens, we'll see. But there's a chance he travels at least, and that Myles gets a chance to break this record in front of his counterpart, who he's been compared to throughout his career. I asked Myles about that specifically, the idea that what if you get it done in front of TJ Watt? He says it adds no extra juice. So I'll play it.
No. I think the guys around here have that more in their minds about the rivalry and whether it's him and I or the Browns and the Steelers, taking it from them than I do. I just want to go get it to say that I got it because I feel like that's what I'm capable of.
All right, so first and foremost, I'm calling some BS here on Myles. Just a little bit of BS, because I think Myles cares about. These two guys have always tried to be like one-upping each other. We know that about this sort of rivalry between them and these two teams. It's why TJ Watt wanted an extra $1 million on average than Myles when he signed his contract this offseason, and he got it because he's always trying to be just slightly better than Myles Garrett. When Myles won the Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago, he was out here tweeting about it. And then you have Myles, there was that Thursday night game. Actually, I think it was last year's Thursday night game, when he said that he made a statement that he's the best pass rusher in the league after they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I don't buy that he just is totally zoned out on that sort of rivalry between the two. I think there's more there, and that they both kind of play into this a little bit. So I don't think it's just a fan-created thing. I don't think it's just like an outsider-created thing or an NFL at-large media-created thing. Like I think this very much is, they're aware of what's going on. So I think Myles is more. I think there is a little bit of that in play here for him, where he probably is at least slightly excited to potentially break the record in front of TJ and show, hey, I'm still that guy. I'm still the guy that is the best pass rusher in this league. And, now I have another thing sort of over you. I think that that's probably fair. So I don't buy that fully. He doesn't care. He talked about his teammates caring a little bit and the rivalry and all those things, but I think he cares a little bit about that. But it probably doesn't, I understand if it's not at the forefront of his mind, but I think that's what makes him potentially doing it this weekend even more exciting, and why it worked out, like without getting it last week, it worked out better, because if you can do it in front of TJ Watt and the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think that just it's a way better storyline in my opinion. Now there's another thing that could make this an even deeper, and I called it a full circle sort of story here as well. And that is if the Baltimore Ravens win on Saturday against who they play, the Packers, I think. If the Ravens beat the Packers on Saturday and that locks up, or sorry, if the Ravens lose to the Packers on Saturday, that locks up the division for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They get in with a win or a Ravens loss. It's all done. Ravens can't catch them. So, understanding that, if the Ravens lose, you're talking about a Steelers team that gets ready for Sunday, then wakes up Sunday morning and knows we don't have to play all of our guys. And so that would necessitate them potentially sitting Aaron Rodgers, their 40-year-old quarterback, who they certainly don't want to risk getting hurt. And so why would you play him in a meaningless game against the Cleveland Browns, right? You wouldn't. And so there comes Mason Rudolph trotting out onto the field to potentially start for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this scenario. And if that happens, Myles Garrett would have a chance to break the sack record against the guy that we all know infamously he had the incident against, where he swung his helmet at him and hit him in the head, and then he got suspended. We know how the story goes. We know what happened. We don't know fully what was said on audio because the NFL never released it, but we know the incident. And I think that would be a fitting conclusion and end to him breaking this sack record, would be for it to come against the quarterback that he had this now infamous NFL altercation with, and that he was ripped and criticized for. I think it would just be a funny, not even funny, but it would be an ironic way for it to all come to a conclusion is he gets the single season sack record against Mason Rudolph. It'd be more memorable, I think, against Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers is an all-time great, and that clip would be iconic, like two legends colliding, Myles and Aaron Rodgers. But for those who obviously know the story and the situation, I don't know how people wouldn't be intrigued by the idea that it could potentially come against Mason Rudolph if that game means nothing for the Steelers on Sunday. Myles actually was asked about it. This is a shorter clip. Here's what he said.
I don't think there's a lot of history between the two of us, but whether I get it against him or I get it against Aaron, it makes no difference to me as long as it gets got.
Playing it close to the vest there, downplaying it, obviously, in typical Myles Garrett fashion, same way he did about getting the record against TJ. I kind of expected that. He's not going to relitigate the entire thing. It was probably, as far as his football career goes, like the lowest point of his football career. I don't think he wants to go back and revisit it. And I'm sure on some level he doesn't care. These are the things that we get to care about. But you can't tell me that storyline would not bring the entire incident, the entire thing full circle, and be just the perfect fitting end to that entire saga if he were to get it against Mason Rudolph on Sunday. I think it'd be perfect. Doing it in front of TJ as well. Like, the storylines in this instance write themselves. Sign me up for it. Sign me up for it. Go Packers on Saturday. Get a win so that it's Mason Rudolph starting on Sunday. And let's see. And honestly, he might have a better chance of getting Mason Rudolph down because, as I talked about earlier in the week, Aaron is so good at getting rid of the football quickly. And the Steelers team is running the football so effectively, which they probably will still lean on the run game no matter what. But I think you have a better chance of probably getting to Mason Rudolph than you do Aaron Rodgers. But that's just me. All right. It's about that time. It's a Friday. I give my prediction for Browns and Steelers on Sunday. And it could be a slog of a game, especially if the Steelers aren't playing some of their starters. We will talk about it coming up. And I'll give you my prediction on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports. There's bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's fast, simple, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. The app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive, and the new Stacks feature also lets you choose the same player up to 3 times in one lineup. For example, Shedeur Sanders, more on quarterback passing yards, more on touchdowns. And listen, he was running around a little bit last week against the Buffalo Bills. Maybe you could throw more rushing yards on there too. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot feature saves your lineup. I wish more fantasy apps had that feature. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's going to be right. All right, it's prediction time here on Locked On Browns. Steelers coming to town on Sunday. We know that. We've walked through and talked through all of the storylines pretty much at this point throughout the week that are sort of converging and intersecting in this game, and all the things that kind of meet in the middle here where the rubber meets the road for this one. It's going to be fascinating to watch and see how those things kind of come to fruition, whether it's the Myles sack record, and if it comes against Aaron Rodgers or Mason Rudolph, it's the TJ Watt being there, it's all that. We will have you, it's going to be interesting no matter what. But at the heart of all this is obviously a football game that's still getting played. And, someone's likely to come out as winning and someone's likely to come out losing, and the game still could matter to the Steelers on Sunday if the Ravens somehow beat the Packers. Now, we'll see. We don't know if Lamar Jackson's playing in that game. It sounds like he's doubtful. And that's where I honestly think this conversation, if you're going to make an educated prediction for this game, starts. Because if the Ravens win that game on Saturday, the Steelers have no motivation, like I said, to play much of anybody. Aaron Rodgers surely won't play. They might rest, some other key players. Maybe one of the running backs. If Gainwell's been so fantastic for them, maybe it would be him, but maybe it'd be Jaylen Warren. I don't know. There's probably some alignment they might try to get out of there because they've already been dealing with a ton of injuries up front anyway. Like, keep guys healthy, try to get them through a game that means nothing to them. It just changes the math on everything. And that honestly does then pave the way for the Browns to potentially pull off the win, because it's the Browns trying to still finish the season strong in some capacity despite having a losing season, and trying to still play hard with a quarterback who's certainly still trying to do all that because he's trying to win a job for next year, versus a Steelers team that's just a bunch of backups. Now, they could still lose the game too, but it changes the dynamics obviously a little bit that you have him or you have this scenario where it might not mean much to the Steelers and they might not have to kind of go all out here. And so understanding that, I think that, that sort of changes the math on how this game could play out and what this thing could look like. I honestly think it was probably going to be a slog of a game a little bit anyway, because I think it's going to be very ground dependent. The team that runs the ball better is probably going to win, and that seems like it trends towards the Pittsburgh Steelers because of the way they've been playing of late, running the football in particular. And the Browns have struggled to run the football, had some success last week against a bad Bills run defense, but the Steelers run defense conversely has been one of the best in football. Like, they've been really good of late. And so, that's a problem. I don't know if they're going to be able to establish that. But and that's part of the equation here too. But regardless, I think it was going to be a slog no matter what, especially without DK Metcalf out there with the suspension, obviously. But at the same time, it does feel like, it could sway. I could be completely wrong and off here if it ends up just being like this maybe a shootout of a game because it's the Browns versus the Steelers backups or whatever it might be. So it's going to be, there's a lot to sort of unpack there in that regard. And I'm curious to see how that game Saturday goes, because it heavily impacts Sunday and, then weighs into what happens if the Browns do win and all those different things. But that's where the conversation, I think, starts when it comes to making a pick for this game. And then I do think from an X's and O standpoint, like the run game here, the Steelers' run game scares me against the Browns' run defense that struggled. I think they cleaned some things up in the second half of that Bills game, and they played better. But, are all those things corrected? Are they going to make the tackles that have been an issue? That's been an issue of late, to make sure that they're getting the Steelers' offense off the field. It's a little easier against their backups, of course, but we don't know. And then, like, the Steelers' defense is playing better of late. I still think there's some, they're susceptible to some bigger plays. Shedeur Sanders wants to take those shots, so I think he's going to try to push the ball downfield again this week, while also still trying to be smart with the football. If Saturday goes the way I think it could go with the Ravens losing, there's a really good chance this game ends up, like, the Browns end up winning this football game. I think it's a real possibility. I don't want to live in a world where I'm just assuming anything, but I kind of am assuming that's what's going to happen, is that the Ravens are going to lose. But listen, they could win, and then the pressure's kind of on the Steelers to just get this thing locked up or get the division sort of solidified this week instead and just kind of be done with it, over and done with it. I think is what they prefer to happen. So I'm going into this right now though thinking it's going to be a slog of a game. Both offenses are probably going to have some troubles here or there. The one thing I haven't really looked into is what the weather's supposed to look like on Sunday, because I've been so bogged down with the holiday and whatnot, spending time with family. It's supposed to be 53, and it looks like pretty high chances of rain. Although this is saying, oh no, that's next Sunday. Sorry, this is saying about an 86% chance of rain. So if it's going to be wet, that's going to certainly impact things as well. Which means again, I go back to it. I think that sort of births a low scoring affair. So I'm going into this thing with my prediction being Steelers 20, Browns 17, maybe winning on a last second field goal. We know Chris Boswell is going to play, and that guy can kick a ton of field goals. And he can kick them from pretty much anywhere. Maybe not in the rain, but he can kick them from pretty much anywhere. So I'm going to say the Steelers still win this game, whether their backups play or not. Or whether a number of their backups are playing or not, and they get out of there with a victory to just make sure that they win the division, even if the Ravens lose on Saturday, and take care of business. But I think the Browns have a chance to sort of keep it close with all the factors thrown in: the weather, potential for Aaron Rodgers and some of these other guys resting, all those different things. I think it's a close game, but the Steelers equaling out, much like the spread at FanDuel indicates, -3 in favor of the Steelers. I think that's probably about what the margin is going to be in this game anyway. And I'll say Steelers 20, Browns 17. Send me your predictions at @Spencito_. You can also hit me up in the comment section here on the Locked On Browns YouTube channel if you're watching there. And let me know what you think happens on Sunday, especially if you're going to the game and you're hoping for a Browns win over Pittsburgh here late in the season. Also, don't forget, we appreciate you making our show your first listen every day. But you already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club to get Locked On Browns with no interruptions, a members-only Discord access, and more just for $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonbrowns.supercast.com or check out the link in the show notes to learn more. You can also keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an Everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you on Sunday, Cleveland. Happy holidays. See you then.